Welcome to the Eventful Podcast, where real conversations meet big ideas.
This is where the real journey gets shared.
It's honest,
It's inspiring.
and it's always eventful.
Well, I'm very excited about this next guest. I go way back with her. This is Janae Redmond, who has been in the ad tech space for many years and someone that I actually used to work with, but she now runs global product operations at Publicis currently.
Awesome.
Welcome, Janae.
Awesome. Thanks, ladies. It's wonderful to be here and excited to chat.
We're so glad to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time. We know you're a busy lady, so any little block on your calendar that we get, we are very grateful for. So we have so many questions for you. We're so excited to chat and dig in a little bit on things. But I know you through Meredith,
Yes.
and we've chatted and met a few times. And I know you, and as Meredith mentioned, you guys have known each other for a long time. So I want to hear about how you know each other. What's the link there? What's the history? And I'm sure you've been through many things together and done some fun
Trials
stuff.
and tribulations, add some color there. No, a great question. I think important context setting for one, the being here and humbled to be here with both you ladies. So thank you for asking me to join. It suggests that I might have something to offer, which that'll be remain to be seen. But yeah, Meredith and I go way back. I joined this company, this then little company called MoPub in let's see, what was it, in 2012? And I think it was there that Meredith and I had the opportunity to meet. I remember I was flying out to San Francisco and she was our receptionist at the time and supporting our CEO, if I'm not mistaken. And it actually was one of the first faces that greeted me in the office, which was a wonderful face to be greeted by. And since then, our friendship has grown. So it wasn't just professional, but I had the opportunity to see Meredith grow in her career professionally. She went from being a receptionist to now being a host on a podcast and running her own events company. I mean, what could be more exciting and wonderful to see women that you've met in your life and in your career and seeing their career growth. So yeah, our friendship has evolved, and I'm thankful to not only have called her a colleague, but now to be a friend and seeing her business take a different shape and form from when I first heard about what you ladies were up to back. Damn, I think it was during the pandemic, right?
Oh, deep pandemic. I mean, just to give a little shout out to Janae, she actually was our first technical advisor. You didn't know that you were our advisor, but you were an advisor
Yeah,
for us.
yeah. I was like, really? I hope it was good advice.
We're still here. So
Yeah.
that was March 2020 when, after Jess and I had started our business 4 months before pandemic hit, which is probably the worst thing that could happen for a business run on being public facing because we couldn't have any
Yeah,
gatherings.
event orientation, in-person experiences being kind of prime to the essence of what you did. I do recall the conversation. I was like, well, shit, this is a tough time.
But you did advise us to go. I will never forget. You said you should go virtual. And if you could be supportive of your customers through that, they're going to think you're smart and savvy and they're going to hire you for in-person. And that did happen. So I think I won't say you're the reason why we're still here, but you definitely are like an aspect.
I gave you
of
the
it.
the encouragement to continue forth. It sounds like I said some smart things at some point in my career, at the very least, encouraging that paid off. So I'm glad I could be supportive during what I think for anyone around during that time was a very challenging time, whether you're running a business or otherwise. So I'm glad to see that you're still here doing prospect events and now building out that brand further with this wonderful podcast.
Thank you. I know Jess was asking us about how we go back, but I also want to hear a little bit about how you got started in your career, because I very much admire you. A lot of people, hopefully, that are watching this podcast are some veterans that we've worked with. We're actually going to be interviewing Casey as well. But
Love that.
You have such an admirable career. And as a woman, I think a lot of people in the industry that I've spoken to also very much admire you. So if you want to just give a little background on just how you kind of started to where you are now, that would be awesome.
Oh, how much time do we have?
As much as you want.
I love that. We'll try and keep this succinct because I think there's a number of ebbs and flows to my career path. But honestly, I would say my career path has kind of been this hybrid career path. And when I say that, I mean that to talk about the different types of like companies I've worked for. So I've had experience in working in these kind of early stage startups, and also these Fortune 500 companies. So when I think about the early stage startup, you tend to, and as you ladies know, it can be a little chaotic. So I think there's a part of me that's chaos curious, if you will. Um, but there's also a part of me that clearly thrives in structure, right? If you look at the contrast between the two of those things, a startup like my early days with Meredith at Mopub, in contrast to a big organization like Facebook or Meta, I think you could agree that there are some stark differences. There's hustle in both. There's a different hustle in that early stage, but when you're at a big company, the hustle looks different and it kind of takes this form of influence. And I think to me that's kind of the difference between the two. And perhaps what's unique about my career is that I've had experience kind of working in both of those ecosystems, or I shouldn't say ecosystems, but working in those different company archetypes, kind of early stage, as well as kind of these larger organizations. And when you introduced me, you mentioned kind of my role today and where I'm at. So I'm leading global product operations at Publicis. And if I think about the dynamics of what drew me to some of those early stage companies earlier in my career, and to some of the skills that I acquired and things that I enjoyed about that more structured environment, and scaled environment, I think that's kind of why I ended up where I did, today. The opportunity that I'm currently working on within Publicis, while the organization itself it's a global organization, I think close to 100,000 people. Yet the team that I'm a part of and the work that I'm responsible for is very much nascent. Every day is chaotic. We have no process, and yet we are exceptionally well funded. We're trying to build a product and take it to market. We're leveraging the use of generative AI and all of the buzzwords that I could throw in there. So to me, when I first was approached with this opportunity, I was like, oh, this feels good. This feels early stage, but big, and something that I can uniquely bring from a value perspective because I've had experiences in both. And that's kind of why I ended up where I am. But I'd be remiss to not mention how I ended up here. And frankly, most of the career opportunities I've had, but it's my network. And I think I included this in my LinkedIn post when I took this opportunity because I was reflecting on, well, there are a lot of things that people post on LinkedIn. Some of them are just painful to read. So I went with the more short, sweet, like no one really gives a shit what I'm doing. So let me focus on something that might be interesting to people. And I think it's worth kind of highlighting here and kind of in response to that question and kind of like how I ended up here and what my journey's been. I'd have to say the cornerstone of my career has been my network. And I've been so grateful to all of the people that have helped me along the way. But most notably, the reason I ended up at Publicis and at this particular role was Joel Lunenfeld, who I used to work with at Twitter. So again, I worked at Twitter for 7 years and built an incredible network of super smart and talented, wonderful people. And this summer, I should say, I guess it's a new year. So last summer, I got an outreach from Joel, and he was like, "Hey, I'd love to talk to you about an opportunity at Group." And admittedly, I was like, I have no experience working at an agency or working client side, so I have no idea what value I could bring. But sure enough, one thing led to another. And despite kind of anti-pitching myself for the role, being like, I don't think I'm the right person, I got drawn in. And it was those kind of fundamental dynamics of this mix of early stage, this interesting kind of scaled organization to be part of, and ultimately the people. I think at the end of the day, people come first when it comes to kind of the work. We spend so much time in our office or doing our jobs. Like the people you work with matter. And it was reassuring that someone I had used to work with and had respect for was at this company and kind of ushering me in. So it kind of gave me the confidence I needed to feel like this was the right leap, despite it being, I think, fairly unconventional for my previous track. Agency side is, I think, quite different from what I learned. A lot of naysayers that were like, you don't want to go agency side. But here I am 7 months later and so far enjoying it.
I actually just want to quickly dive into the network aspect because on a previous podcast, we're talking about one of the major reasons we've been able to build our business is through
Yeah.
network. And so I just find that parallel so interesting because similarly, I'm not working internally somewhere, but I still had to build Jess and I don't want to say me. Jess and I had to build our client Rolodex through all referrals and people that we know. So I
Yeah.
find that parallel very interesting, even just with like your career, because I know that you're very, very good at keeping in touch with people and networking. And I know a lot of the jobs
Yeah.
that you've had in the past have just been through that. So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that with reflection and time, I look back at my early part of my career and I don't think I fully appreciated just how important a network can be. But when I looked at, and frankly, if it wasn't for this podcast, I wouldn't have spent time thinking about some of the experiences that I had. So thank you. It forced some introspection. And that's like a cue to everybody that you should pause and think about things at times, because you can actually you tease out some really interesting insights, which frankly were new to me as of this morning. So thank you for this. But when I think about like the earliest stages of my career, it was my neighbor, like literally my mom, like my mom's friends in my neighborhood that got me my first job out of college. Like I wouldn't have, and that happened to be in advertising. It was in television advertising to place spot TV ads. But you take that and you go to my next opportunity, which I did source myself. I think about this like explicitly when I was reflecting this morning. I found my second job, which was that first one was this company called Telerep Spot TV Sales. It's not something I would recommend. I was a little down and out and definitely hitting those job boards hard and looking. So I'd never want to go back to that, which is why it's important to maintain a strong network. But went back to that and remember just hitting those job boards and interviewing. And I was so early in my career. I was not even a year out of college. And it was like, oh, you're going to have to cold call for, 8 hours a day and sit in this like mosh pit. I'm like, is that what I went to college for? Like, this can't be it. And sure enough, one of the last job boards I applied to, or job recs I applied to, was this company then called Drive PM. It was owned by a quantive. It was about basically putting banner ads on the internet. I mean, that's what I understood it to be when I interviewed. And I interviewed with this gentleman, Kirk McDonald, who you may know. He's a veteran in the industry, and his counterpart, Liberty Karras. And they took a chance on me. And that was kind of like my first foray into this ecosystem. But frankly, a career defining moment for me because I got a new job and was ready to leave the one I was in, which I was pretty miserable at. And importantly, a relationship, Kirk specifically, who has been a huge proponent and kind of part of my network and has opened up consequently as a result of that first job, a number of other opportunities. So I think for anyone who's decided to listen or watch this podcast, don't ever underestimate the value of your network because it truly has come and paid dividends, certainly for me over my career in more ways than one, not just in opening doors, but also being supports and mentors and just generally encouraging, even if quietly from the sidelines.
Yeah, that's so interesting. We've filmed several episodes now of this podcast. We talked so many times, touched on you just never know where something's going to come from.
You
And
really don't.
network wise, you never know who's going to come out of the woodwork or who you met or who you remember or those touch points along the way. That one of my favorite quotes is actually, "'Twas the straying that found the path direct."
I'm
And
impressed that you can quote something. It is one of my skills that I'm terrible at. So that
I'm impressed that
and
I could quote that as well, but it's something.
do you have a cue card in front of you? 'Cause
Meredith knows I have a terrible memory. So, but that
oh,
just goes to
line
show
me
that
up right
something
behind you then.
that's Meredith is my memory. Like that is very valuable for me to have her around. So, but that's something that has always stuck with me because I feel like through the networking aspect of just career, owning a business, running a business, being a leader like you are, it's those like straying moments that are not strategic and that are not expected, that when you look back and you're introspective like you were saying you were this morning, you kind of go back down through the line and you're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, and then I met that
Mhm.
person and then this happened and this happened. It's such a strange like organic coming together of everything just in general for careers, I think, or running a business. So
100%. And it's not to be underestimated. And uh, I'd love to say I'm super, like, it's a superpower of mine to kind of maintain and grow my network. That is definitely not it. As someone who is close with a number of people who are great at building and maintaining networks, but it is something I endeavor to be better at because I think that like inherently I'm a people person. It's easy to build relationships, or I find it enjoyable and I remain curious getting to know people. But you highlight everyone's busy, so it's often very hard to maintain those relationships that are beyond the transaction. And I personally never want to be seen to somebody else as like a transactional person. So that to me is one of those harder things about maintaining and being thoughtful about your network is how do you ensure that those relationships aren't just a mile wide and an inch deep. I can't believe I got that quote right. um, and that there is depth to them beyond just a, hey, I'm looking for a new job, can you help me? Or, hey, I'm struggling with this at work, do you have any advice to give? So that's something that I'm like always kind of lingers in the back of my mind in terms of like, let me make sure that I'm thoughtful and I can kind of cultivate ongoing relationships, which kind of also limits to some degree the scale in which you can actually maintain, your network. But I also realize that we're in business, so there's just this element of transaction that also takes place. And I notice that men don't think twice about like reaching out for a favor, which is quite different, I think, than
Yeah.
perhaps as a female. I feel like, well, I need to have spoken to them recently before I ask them for something. And
Yeah.
that's not the case when it's the other gender, in my observation.
That's so interesting. These conversations are always they just like take a path that's really interesting. I also wonder, is there sort of a difference when a woman reaches out to a man for a favor and then or when a man reaches out to a man directly or it's I've never thought about that, but it's such a
Yeah,
different attitude between the
for
two, I
sure.
think.
I don't know how it can be perceived. It's just I have had these moments, particularly when I've been exploring new opportunities or struggling something. I'm grateful that I have a very strong and deep bench of women in my network, many of which have just people who used to work for me who have become friends. So I have them as kind of my like board of advisors and my first line of defense. But in the absence of that, or frankly, in looking for diversity and perspective and considering the other side of the ecosystem, which are men that have been very important in my life and have shaped kind of my own experiences, I do ask myself, I'm like, what would this person do? He's a man. He'd probably just reach out and not think twice about it. So I need to get over it and just like send the text message or send the email. And worst case scenario, someone's gonna be like, nah, I don't have time. And that's absolutely a reasonable response. So I have tried to pause and say, hey, why am I holding back from asking for that? Or why am I delaying this request? Is it just kind of like this story I've built up in my head that someone doesn't have the time for me? Or is there actually merit to it? And more often than not, it's some sort of narrative I've created that's not actual like how things are playing out in reality. And I'm like, what would a man do in this situation? Oh, they would just send the message. So
I mean, it's such simple advice, but it really goes a long way. Like it's such a good reminder, truly. I've actually
yeah,
never thought about that. So Janae, I know you and Meredith met when you were, I mean, you're both still considered young, but when you were quite a bit younger. So,
age is
and
just a
you
number.
truly, and you've been such a leader throughout your career and what I've heard from Meredith. So how did your age and as your careers progress, how did it change your leadership style and how you see yourself as a leader and also how you perceived your role as you've moved through the
Mhm.
years of your career and changes?
Oh, that's a that's an interesting question, and it's one of those things where hopefully I can get this saying right. But again, I was reflecting on this earlier. I for sure was young, both in inexperience, but also just general age when I stepped into what I would call management. Management being the path to general leadership, being responsible for somebody else, and hindsight's 2020, as the saying goes, or my favorite one is like, it's hard to read the label when you're inside the jar. And that's kind of the best way to describe my response to that question. So if you had asked me then, like, did it matter that I was young? Did I worry about that? I think in the moment, I had exceptional tunnel vision, which is to, I think, my benefit. Because had I appreciated the gravity, or when you actually think about leading people and trying to help them in their career, like it's a fair bit of responsibility. So now, yeah, I do think that my age for sure shaped my perception of kind of how I saw myself in the role, probably how others saw me in my roles, and certainly shaped how I am as a leader. So, I reflect back to actually when I was at Mopub and I was trying to hire. I joined the company and I needed to build out a team. This was the first time I was like really building a team. I had some management experience prior, but this was like from ground zero. I'm hiring a bunch of people in to come and work for me. That, like, the internal doubt and that kind of negative dialogue that was happening at that point in my life, whew, it was not pretty. I'm like, wow, we
For sure.
really can be mean to ourselves in our own heads. I'm like, why
Yeah.
would this person ever want to work for me? Like, they have so much more experience. Or I'd meet people and be like, wow, this person would be fire for our company. Like, they'd be so valuable and they have so much industry expertise, but what the hell are they going to learn from me? Or you bring in the fact that like an older man is someone that you want to bring into the organization. I'm this young woman. Are they going to respect me? Or are they going to work for me? Like, are they going to leave their actual really great job and come and be in my team? And I think that inner dialogue kind of evolved. It wasn't just specific to hiring or recruiting, but also being in a meeting and, should I speak up? Is anyone going to listen? Do I have the right to be in this room? So there was definitely a lot of that I think persisted in my head and kind of was this constant kind of lingering in the background. So it for sure shaped my leadership and how I operated, because what I think became very apparent to me was, one, the dialogue was probably a little loud and unnecessary, and I probably shouldn't listen to it. But more importantly, that I didn't have to know everything. So knowing that I was intuitively just earlier in my career and I wasn't the most experienced allowed me to create space for a lot of other people. So even if I was doubting whether or not I could add value, I was able to recruit some really exceptionally talented people and bring them into the organization. And by nature, they were able to thrive because I leaned on them for what I brought them in for. I'm like, you are an expert here. This is not my area of expertise. I am not all knowing. And I think that ultimately, one, that led to a lot of loyalty and people sticking around because they felt like they could grow and were truly a partner versus a boss, right? Or I was seen that way. Um, and I think the other thing that I thought was interesting, or kind of in contrast to my internal monologue, is that all of these other really smart people I respected were telling me I could do it. And they were actively investing in me, whether it was informal coaching, which I was super grateful for having, or in more quiet ways and just encouraging me to take that next role or raise my hand for that big project. And I think the combination of external people I respected kind of pushing me gave me enough confidence to also be comfortable to say, I don't know everything, and create that space for other leaders who I was able to eventually recruit and come and work into my organization, or work alongside me to be successful. So, yeah, I do think my age certainly shaped my leadership style to some degree. And perhaps became a strength over time.
You touched on it a little bit, but what is the biggest thing in your leadership style? Because we, lead a small team, and we had to all of a sudden be in a role of leadership, which we
Yeah.
weren't expecting. We just kind of evolved there. But how has your leadership style changed? Like, what's the biggest factor that's changed from when you were first starting out as leader to now, and as you've moved through and worked at different places and in different roles?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, building off of the question you had just previously asked, inexperience and age definitely set a foundation for me in terms of creating space for others and feeling comfortable and getting comfortable and not being the all knowing. So I think that's one aspect that was very prevalent and very real early in my career. And then I think if I fast forward a number of years, that still is very present today, but where I have gotten a little more comfortable and confident is like, hey, I do know largely what I'm doing in some circumstances, not all. And I can be a little bit clearer or crisper in activating others. So what I have identified is that I can quickly figure out what people are pretty good at, areas that they need to work on, and areas where they may not even realize they have strengths. and being able to tap into those, which I think takes time, takes experience, it takes working very closely with people, understanding different styles, what motivates people. So I think that has kind of been added to the foundation of, creating space for others and letting them kind of find their path and enabling them, and then taking that a step further and really starting to lead more into coaching people if they want it. I think much like advice, not everybody wants advice. Um, but coaching others and kind of tapping into their unrealized strengths and helping them see how they can be successful. So I think that's kind of another area or ways in which my leadership has evolved over time. And I'd love to say that you can take one of those like leadership for dummies type books or read all of the different books that exist out there and figure that out. But some of it is just frankly lived experience. The more you work with people, the more you frankly fail. I've had plenty of situations with people who have worked for me where I was like, wow, I really fucked that one up. And you learn very quickly, well, that's probably not that's not the approach you should take for all people, right? And all kind of situations and circumstances. So it's definitely been a bit of learning and not always just easy lessons learned.
Totally. And that's so interesting because I think when you're younger, you think that your value, you perceive your value as having all the answers. And as you get
Yeah.
older or you learn, you
Yeah.
continue in your career growth, you realize that it's okay not to have all the answers. And it's okay to tell somebody you don't know the answer because
100%.
if you don't have these opportunities to learn, like what are you doing in life, right?
Yeah.
And if we did know everything, it would be pretty boring. So,
There's diversity in the perspective and definitely confidence that comes with admitting what you know and don't know. I've definitely
absolutely.
come to accept that. I sometimes need to
Absolutely.
challenge myself on that though, because I'm like, I think I know. I'm like, why don't we ask? Let's ask some
Yeah.
questions first.
Yeah.
The ego can get in the way at times, right?
Truly. And now and also an interesting point that you had just talking about different people are different and
Yeah.
their brain doesn't work like yours. And you said now you're in a more client facing role, which we of course have a team, but we also have to deal with clients all the time. And
Yeah.
it's like you have to navigate different people different ways throughout all of this. And that's even
Yep.
a learning curve. Every time you work with
Oh
someone
yeah.
new or you meet someone new, it's like, okay, that they didn't like
I'd love
that.
for it to be cookie cutter and be like, yep, copy paste. I've seen you before. But the reality is we might all like fundamentally be humans, but we're all unique little snowflakes at the end of the day.
Truly, truly. And I think having that quality of being perceptive, which it sounds like you're so good at and you've honed so much, you just have to be perceptive of and kind of anticipating like how is somebody going to take this or
Yeah.
maybe I should ask more questions or how are they going to feel about this because that's such a big aspect of dealing with people. So,
For sure.
We deal with lots of personalities, so.
No, I can only imagine, especially in generally like exciting or high pressure, high stakes
Yeah.
experiences. So I bet you see all of the best of humanity in those
Yeah.
moments.
We'll keep it at that.
Mhm.
So, Janae, was there a key turning point that shaped your direction?
Ah, well, that's a good question. Um, and, and it's a hard one to say that like there was this like lightning bolt moment, right? That was like, all defining. I had this epiphany. This is what I need to do. Um, I think I don't think there was one defining moment. For me, it was like a series of these like small, let's call it like 1 degree corrections, or and I don't even want to say corrections because I don't think that's fair, but 1 degree course changes, right? Like I think about a plane, you get on a plane, if a pilot changes just slightly 1 degree, the destination isn't going to be the same if it's never changed again, or if you keep changing it, right? So I think about my, is there a key turning point more through the lens that there was probably a series of events that really kind of chipped away at the block or kind of led me to the where I'm at today. And I got to go back to like childhood. I'd be remiss not to. I mean, and this it's funny, this is something I've definitely highlighted in kind of like panel conversations before, but I was a gymnast when I was young, up until the age of like 11 or 12, and a competitive gymnast, not just like tumbling for fun. And I never thought about it this way until someone had asked me a pointed question and, said, where did you get these skills and how do you think about it? And I have to say that like gymnastics actually played a pretty meaningful role despite being like a single digit age human. You learn quickly to be independent and you're competing against yourself. So there's always this self betterment and kind of moving forward, but you're part of a team. So that's what's unique about the sport of gymnastics is you're part of this broader team and you can't be a weak link. So you're always participating, but you're kind of almost competing against some of your teammates. So I think there was a lot of discipline and learning and team dynamics that I kind of picked up at a young age. And sticking to kind of that era, my parents, though, they certainly shaped my mindset. Both were small business entrepreneurs. My mom's an accountant. She runs her own practice. My dad is a pharmacist. He has his own business. And I think growing up around people who were motivated and running their own practices, their own businesses, and had values and hard work, I think that certainly kind of was a degree course correction or shaped in some way. And then, you come into like my professional career. We'll fast forward just in the interest of time. Otherwise, we could be here for a while. I mentioned earlier someone making a big bet on me early in my career, Kirk McDonald. Like maybe that wasn't just a 1 degree course correction, but several at the time. I didn't know he was going to be this industry veteran, but that opened doors I probably wouldn't have known to even knock on. So, that was meaningful. And then, there aren't just professional shifts, but yeah, I stepped into a leadership role, a much larger leadership role than I certainly felt ready for when MoPub was acquired by Twitter. Jim Payne, who was our CEO at the time and someone who I still have a tremendous amount of respect for and has mentored me, was like, "You're going to take over the business. I'm leaving." My reaction was like, "What? I'm sorry. You want me to run the company that has just been acquired and integrate it and be
Wow.
responsible for all these people? Like, you fucking crazy?" But I survived. So I think that was kind of another one of those like, frankly, oh shit moments, but moved forward. And actually, frankly, not too shortly after that, probably a few years later, that like on a personal perspective, I chose to leave my marriage. I got divorced. Like that certainly had, certain course correction and set me on a slightly different personal course. So I think that played a role in kind of shaping my overall direction. And then a few years after that, it was like 7 years after being at Twitter, I decided to leave. I took time off. I wasn't going to another opportunity, but for me, that felt like a very kind of purposeful pause. I was like, okay, I've been through a lot. I did 7 years at Twitter. MoPub was incredible. I've had some personal trials and tribulations. Like, I'm going to take a moment to like breathe and reflect and do all of these like amazing things. It was timed with February of 2020 to be specific. So for you ladies, that was probably right about the time you were starting your business and
Oh, yeah.
when COVID was kicking off into full swing. So that was
Oh,
like
yeah.
a super weird and like messy experience and not necessarily the time off I had imagined, but it did have an impact on me and I think certainly shaped my direction because it was probably the first time I like stopped and just was like, okay, let me reflect. And I had a lot of realizations on kind of just where I was at, what I was looking for, what I call life math, and like what I wanted next, and led me to my next big opportunity, joining Facebook. And I'd highlight that as kind of another kind of degree correction, or I don't want to say correction again. It's like a degree change because for the longest time, again, that inner monologue, it's the worst, was telling me like, hey, by the way, you've worked at all these like really big, prominent tech companies. I worked at Microsoft by way of acquisition,
Wow.
Google by way of acquisition,
Wow.
Twitter by way of acquisition. Like, can I actually interview and get a job myself? Like, am I qualified? Like, there was this like nasty little voice in my head being like, "Well, you kind of slid in through the back door at all of these like respectable companies." So for me, that was kind of a defining moment in that I felt more confident after taking that role at Facebook because I got it all on my own, obviously through my network. Red Thread's still there, but I interviewed and landed the job myself. So for me, that was kind of another big I think, moment or confident building moment anyway. And, I've already kind of brought you up to speed as to kind of where I'm at today. But, to succinctly answer your question, no, I don't think there was one lightning bolt moment, but just a series of these kind of 1 degree shifts in kind of life experiences that have created for me and kind of put me on the course and where I am today.
That's so impressive. Wow.
I just think it's interesting what you're saying about like just with self-confidence. We were talking about this also in another episode. Like to me, you exude such self-confidence and you had ran like MoPub organization within Twitter, and then you were like doubting yourself getting a job at Facebook. I just find that fascinating because externally I just would
Well,
never
hopefully
think that
others don't feel alone as a result of
no,
that. Like,
but
I
that's
imagine we
why
all struggle with, like, we're
no,
human, right? Like,
no,
you have
that's
to doubt
why
yourself at some point.
no, that's why it's like very like humane. Like I don't know. It's like humbling to hear that because I wouldn't think that that's something that would have gone through your mind, but maybe that's just me judging or something.
No, or questioning whether or not your own self-doubt
Yes.
is real or viable, right? I think it's certainly humbling when your own inner monologue is just like very mean to you.
Yeah.
But it is a reminder that the people around you are the ones that are like actually seeing you in action and are
Yeah.
probably a better testament or a better reflection and mirror of kind of your worth and your experience
Yeah.
than um we're our own worst critics. That's
Yeah.
just at the end of the day. And I've come to appreciate that I'm not alone in that. There are many
Yeah.
people who have self doubt and
Yeah.
compliments to things like podcasts. You can hear some of the most
Yeah.
famous and talented people,
Yeah.
from athletes to politicians, that are like, yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah. I think we're just quick. Well, I used the wrong word. Judging wasn't. It's making an assumption. Like we make an assumption
Yes,
sometimes in the day to day because I listen to a lot of podcasts or I admire a lot of different leaders and I just assume they're always so confident, but
sure
everyone
footed.
has self doubt. Yes.
Hmm. I'm with you there. You're not alone in that sense. I'm like, wow, that person seems like they've got it all figured out. Meanwhile, one click deeper. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So true.
So, Janae, we know you also do some angel investing outside of your current role. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny. I think angel investing, and again, maybe this comes back to like self-doubt and the conversation we were just having, but angel investing to me feels so very intentional and like there's like this structure that's around it. So I don't even know if I put like investor on my like LinkedIn because that's probably what Chat GPT told me to put on there based on my resume and my experience. But in reality, it's like I don't actually see myself as an angel investor because it feels so formal. And there are a number of people I have tremendous respect for in terms of how they invest that I think my name being alongside them would seem like would kind of challenge their credibility or diminish it in some ways. So I will humbly say that yes, I have invested in a number of early stage companies, and I've been fortunate to get exposure to these and have people ask me to be part of those experiences. And again, that's kind of through my network and hopefully through the reputation I've built. A number of folks have thought I could be helpful in their journeys as they're kind of starting. But my concern always is like, well, I'm not a founder. How am I going to be helpful here? But what I have found is that it's kind of true to, I think, my general, probably ties back nicely into like my leadership style. Like I care very much about people. And I like being helpful. I like being able to support people and see them be successful, whether it's free advice that I wasn't aware of that I was giving you ladies early on, or, backed by a check. I've gotten the opportunity, one, to see some businesses that are a very early stage flourish, also struggle and then flourish. And I like being close to that experience. I like being part of something, even if I can't dedicate my time and be actually in the working relationship. It feels good to be able to support founders that have the courage to do what it takes to actually start their own business. And maybe it's for me like filling this unfulfilled dream of my own. Like I don't necessarily want to be a founder, but I have such respect for people who have the courage to do it, that this is kind of my little way of playing a role in that. So I very much enjoy it. It's gotten me exposure to a lot of interesting different industries. So I tend to back companies, and well, I shouldn't say companies in this case. It's mostly people because a lot of these are so early stage that I've seen them pivot a number of times. But I tend to back people who have people I've known, people I have respect for, people who I think are generally resilient is probably the way to frame it. And they've been across a number of different industries, which is super cool because it's stuff that, like, one of the companies I invested in was a fintech company, like, or or insurance tech company, which is actually a subset of fintech. I know nothing about insurance, and like I have no business in kind of being in a business that's insurance tech, but I can, put a check there and help the founder, who's a friend of mine, be set up for success based on just my own lived experiences that have become valuable to her over time. So it's a fun way to kind of stay engaged with other aspects of the ecosystem.
That's really interesting. We're not investors yet. Maybe one
In
day.
time.
But um something that's sort of parallel is that with the business that we of course have so many different types of clients in different
Yeah.
industries. And we see a lot of their marketing and external facing content, and we also produce their internal events and of course have to sign NDAs and all of that. But
Yeah.
something that when starting this business I could have never foreseen is actually learning so much about different industries, about how businesses are run, about what people are telling and showing their internal teams versus what they're saying externally,
Yeah.
how they're scaling and growing, like the executive content. We kind of get a free crash course in these things if we pay
Yeah.
attention to the content and what's happening at the events and why they're holding the event. It's been really fascinating throughout
That's
our
amazing. And I
journey.
think that has to be one super rewarding because you're obviously playing a role in supporting their success. And like you said earlier, you may not have invested in that company, but frankly, you're invested in that company and that client's success by supporting their go to market motions or their executive leadership offsites or their client advisory boards. So I wouldn't count yourself out of the investment space. I think your services that you guys are providing put you right there in shotgun and helping these businesses be successful and grow. What you guys do is mission critical to a number of businesses and kind of building their business. So
Thank you.
don't dilute your value.
Thank you. That's kind. I would say that Meredith and I have had some retro conversations where in the beginning we talked about with when we started with these companies that were small, we were like, should we get paid in equity? And we
I
wish
mean,
we had.
yeah,
That would have
there's
been
like this
smart.
old adage story of like this painter that Zuck hired at Meta. It's like I don't think it's myth. I think it's true. They hired like this painter, and like Zuck didn't have any money or penny to his name at the time. It was early stage Facebook. He gave him equity. Talk about the wealthiest like street painter there must be now. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's not a bad trade off. You're like,
Yeah,
well,
we've thought about it, but
for the right
yeah,
opportunity, for the right founders.
true. Very true.
So, because this is called the Eventful Podcast, we ask every guest to tell us one eventful moment. Now it's your turn.
Hmm. I'm excited. I'm excited to think about this one, but a little ooh, challenged by the question. And I'm going to bring it back to something I said earlier. You had asked about like a key turning point that shaped my direction. And I think I have to take kind of that same position that, which maybe goes against the ethos of your podcast, but hopefully it still leaves the audience with
It's
something
okay.
memorable. I don't know that there was a single eventful moment, much like there wasn't this lightning bolt moment that shaped my direction or career, but rather a series of small, meaningful moments that have kind of shaped the arc of both my professional and personal life. And those together, those series of nudges from people who believed in me, or the courage I had to leave my marriage, or taking a bit of an adjacent position at this company now that I'm with at Publicis. I think ultimately all of those kind of have led up to this kind of eventful life I've had. And I'm super grateful for that. And I'm certain between now and until the end of time for me, I'm gonna have a bunch more of those. And maybe I'll even be invited back in a few years and we can talk about the next set of meaningful and eventful moments that kind of shaped the rest of my time.
We would love that. Well, we are so appreciative and so honored that you joined us and took the time to even be on. And I actually learned so much. This is why I love doing this. Like you, as Meredith mentioned, you see people from a distance and you watch their growth and see their LinkedIn posts and all of those things. But
And wonder what's actually going on behind the scenes. It's a
yeah, it's
bunch of
like what's
self-doubt.
actually happening. But I learned so much. And Meredith always talks about how much she admires you and how much she's learned from you. And
Very
again,
kind.
you helped us in the beginning, which we'll always be appreciative of. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Janae. I mean, it's just this has been such a fun thing for me to do with all like, I know Jess knows some of the speakers better than I do or vice versa, but it's just been so
Yeah.
fun to interview people that I know, but I always learn something new about them. So we
Well,
really, really appreciate it.
thank you again. This was for creating the space for this. I think it was a wonderful opportunity to actually for me to do some self-reflection. I was like, well, I could wing it, but it probably makes sense to just like think a little bit about these questions, give some honest thoughts to them. So hopefully this was interesting for those that end up either viewing or listening.
Yeah, people will definitely learn something from what we talked about with you. So we
If
appreciate it.
anything,
Thank
we
you
can
so
make them
much.
laugh. So
That's our goal.
Yeah.
That's our goal. Everything's too corporate and serious, so we want to have a little
yeah,
fun. So we appreciate it. Thank you
100%.
so much. Thanks for listening to the Eventful Podcast. If you loved this episode, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and catch us on Instagram at the handle @the Eventful Pod. See you next week.